American prosperity depends upon entrepreneurs. These are ambitious and optimistic men and women who are willing to take risks, pursue their dreams, and try to change the world. They mortgage their own homes, they put everything on the line to build a business that fills an unmet need or does something better than what's offered today. But throughout history, prosperity and human flourishing has been stymied or delayed by governments that impose regulatory policies to address supposed harms, but in actuality overstated risk in order to protect incumbent operators, often large and powerful companies that didn't want to compete and that just happened to give big campaign checks to the politicians in power. The United States has mostly chosen a different path, one where a free enterprise system governed by the rule of law allows Americans to freely pursue their ideas, grow their own businesses, and compete without having to obtain permission from all-knowing bureaucrats. Today's hearing on data privacy and artificial intelligence is a debate about which regulatory path we will take. Do we embrace our proven history, one with entrepreneurial freedom and technological innovation, or will we adopt the European model, where government technocrats get to second-guess and manage perceived risks with economic activity, ultimately creating an environment where only big tech with its armies of lawyers and lobbyists exist? Consider this. In 1993, at the dawn of the tech age, the economies of the United States and the European Union were roughly equal in size. Today, the American economy is nearly 50% larger than the EU's. The tech boom happened in America in part because Congress and the Clinton administration deliberately took a hands-off approach to the nascent internet. The result was millions of jobs and a much higher standard of living for Americans. Unfortunately, the Biden administration and many of my colleagues are suggesting the European model for AI, based heavily on hysterical doomsday prophecies to justify a command and control federal regulatory scheme that will cause the United States to lose our technological edge over China. The Biden administration's AI executive actions, as well as many of the AI legislative proposals, call for a new regulatory order that protects giant incumbent operators and discourages innovation with supposedly optional best practices or guidance written by all-knowing bureaucrats, some of whom were recently employed by the same big tech firms they seek to regulate, and some of whom hope to be employed again by those same big tech firms right after they write the rules that benefit those giant big tech firms. We already see federal AI regulators and Biden allies talking about the need to stop, quote, bias, quote, misinformation, quote, discrimination in AI systems and algorithms. That's code for speech police. If they don't like what you say, they want to silence it. Now, AI can certainly be used for nefarious purposes, just like any other technology. But to address specific harms or issues, we should craft appropriate and targeted responses. For example, Senator Klobuchar and I have introduced the bipartisan Take It Down Act, which targets bad actors who use AI to create and publish fake, lifelike, explicit images of real people. Our bill, which is sponsored by many Republican and Democrat members of this committee, would also require big tech to follow a notice and takedown process so ordinary Americans who are victimized by these disturbing images can get them offline immediately. The bipartisan Take It Down Act is a tailored solution to a real problem. On behalf of the teenage girls and others who've been victimized by deep fake explicit imagery, I hope that this committee will take up soon the Take It Down Act and pass it and move it to the floor and get it signed into law. As I conclude, I'd like to address a related matter. the American Privacy Rights Act, APRA. I support Congress, not the FTC or any federal agency, but Congress setting a nationwide data privacy standard. Not only is it good for Americans to be empowered with privacy protections, but it's good for American businesses that desperately need legal certainty given the increasingly complex patchwork of state laws. But our goal shouldn't be to pass any uniform privacy standard, but rather the right standard that protects privacy without preventing U.S. technological innovation. I've discussed APRA with Chairwoman McMorris Rodgers and will continue my offer to work with her. But right now, this bill is not the solution. It delegates far too much power to unelected commissioners at the FTC. It focuses on algorithmic regulations under the guise of civil rights, which would directly empower the DEI speech police efforts underway at the Biden White House, harming the free speech rights of all Americans. As currently constructed, APRA is more about federal regulatory control of the internet than personal privacy. In the end, it's the giant companies with vast resources that ultimately benefit from bills like APRA at the expense of small businesses. The path that Congress needs to take is to put individuals in control of the privacy of their own data and give them transparency to make decisions in the marketplace. And I look forward to working with my colleagues to do exactly that.
Thank you, Senator Cruz. We'll now turn to our panel, starting with Dr. Callow. Thank you so much. We're really proud of the work that the University of Washington has done. I think we're on both. Senator Cruz is mentioning the innovation economy. I think we have that down in the Northwest, but we also want to make sure we have down the important protections that go along with it. So thank you, Dr. Callow, for your presence.
Chair Cantwell, Ranking Member Cruz, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to share my research and views on this important topic. I'm a law professor and information scientist at the University of Washington, where I co-founded the Tech Policy Lab and Center for an Informed Public. The views I express today are entirely my own. Americans are not receiving—
Dr. Callow, could you just bring that microphone a little closer to you?
Of course.
Thank you.
Americans are not receiving the privacy protections they demand or deserve. Not when Cambridge Analytica tricked them into revealing personal details of 87 million people through a poorly vetted Facebook app. Not when car companies shared their driving habits with insurance companies without their consent, sometimes leading to higher premiums, as the senator mentioned. Privacy rules are long overdue, but the acceleration of artificial intelligence in recent years threatens to turn a bad situation into a dire one. AI exacerbates consumer privacy concerns in at least three ways. First, AI fuels an insatiable demand for consumer data. Sources of data include what is available online, which incentivizes companies to scour and scrape every corner of the internet, as well as the company's own internal data, which incentivizes them to collect as much data as possible and store it indefinitely. AI's insatiable appetite for data alone deeply exacerbates the American consumer privacy crisis. Second, AI is increasingly able to derive the intimate from the available. Many AI techniques boil down to recognizing patterns in large data sets. Even so-called generative AI works by guessing the next word, pixel, or sound in order to produce new text, art, or music. Companies increasingly leverage this capability of AI to derive sensitive insights about individual consumers from seemingly innocuous information. The famous detective Sherlock Holmes, with the power to deduce whodunit by observing a string of facts most people would overlook as irrelevant, is the stuff of literary fiction. But companies really can determine who is pregnant based on subtle changes to their shopping habits, as Target reportedly did in 2012. And finally, AI deepens the asymmetries of information and power between consumers and companies that consumer protection law exists to arrest. The American consumer is a mediated consumer. We increasingly work, play, and shop through digital technology. and a mediated consumer is a vulnerable one. Our market choices, what we see, choose, and click, are increasingly scripted and arranged in advance. Companies have an incentive to use what they know about individual and collective psychology, plus the power of design, to extract as much money and attention as they can from everyone else. The question is not whether America should have rules governing privacy. The question is why we still do not. Few believe that the internet, social media, or AI are ideal as configured. A recent survey by the Pew Research Center suggests that an astonishing 81% of Americans assume that companies will use AI in ways for which they are not comfortable. 81%. Just for context, something between 30 and 40% of Americans identify as Taylor Swift fans. Meanwhile, the EU, among our largest trading partners, refuses to certify America as adequate on privacy and does not allow consumer data to flow freely between our economies. What is the point of American innovation if no one trusts our inventions? More and more individual states, from California to Colorado, Texas to Washington, are passing privacy or AI laws to address their residents' concerns. Congress can and should look to such laws as a model. Yet it would be unwise to leave privacy legislation entirely to the states. The internet, social media, and AI are global phenomena. They do not respect state boundaries. And the prospect that some states will pass privacy rules is small comfort to the millions of Americans who reside in states that have not. Congress should pass comprehensive privacy legislation that protects American consumers, reassures our trading partners, and gives clear, achievable guidelines to industry. Data minimization rules, which obligate companies to limit the data they collect and maintain about consumers, could help address AI's insatiable appetites. Broader definitions of covered data could clarify that inferring sensitive information about consumers carries the same obligations as collecting it. And rules against data misuse could help address consumer vulnerability in the face of a growing asymmetry. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before the committee. I look forward to a robust discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Callow. Ms. Kack, thank you so much. Welcome. We look forward to your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Cantwell, Ranking Member Cruz, and esteemed members of this committee. Thank you for inviting me to testify. We're at a very clear inflection point in the trajectory of AI. Without guardrails to set the rules of the road, we're committing ourselves to more of the same, to carrying forward extractive, invasive, and often predatory data practices and business models that have characterized the past decade of the tech industry. We are also committing ourselves to the seamless transition of big tech from surveillance monopolies to AI monopolies. A federal data privacy law could break this cycle, especially one with strong data minimization, which could challenge the culture of impunity and recklessness in the AI industry that's already hurting both consumers and competition. If there's a single point I want to make in today's testimony, it is that now is the moment when passing such a law actually matters before the trajectory has been set. Data privacy regulation is AI regulation, and it provides many of the tools that we need to protect the public from harm. But let's get concrete. How might the AI market shape up differently in the presence of a strong data privacy law? First, with data minimization rules, firms would need to put reason in place of recklessness when it comes to decisions about what data to collect, the purposes to which it can be used, and for how long it can be stored. These requirements would empower lawmakers, but also the public, to demand very basic accountability. So before Microsoft, for example, rushes to release its new Recall AI feature, which, by the way, takes continuous screenshots of everything you see or do on your computer, the company might need to ask itself and importantly document its answer. Does the utility of this feature outweigh the honeypot it's creating for bad actors? As a security researcher quickly discovered with Microsoft Recall, it's actually scarily trivial for an attacker to use malware to extract a record of everything you've ever viewed on your PC. Now, a strong data minimization mandate would have nipped this in the bud. It would have likely disincentivized the development of such a patently insecure feature to begin with. Second, we would have transparency about the data decisions that affect us all. Meta and Google recently announced updates, unilaterally of course, to their terms, which allow AI training from user data. Now, we know about this because European users were alerted by Meta. Without a legal mandate to require it, of course, American users received no such notification. And users of Reddit are also similarly up in arms because their content was just sold to the highest bidder, in this case, Google, for use of training its AI. But it's important to remember that a privacy law would offer much more than just transparency in every single instant I mentioned. Purpose limitation rules would prevent big tech from using AI as its catch-all justification to use and combine data across contexts and store it forever. The FTC has already penalized Amazon for storing the voice data of children indefinitely, using AI as its excuse. But we can't rely on this kind of one-off enforcement. There needs to be rules of the road. And these moves, it's important to remember, would not just safeguard our privacy, they would also act as a powerful check on the data advantages currently being consolidated by big tech to build a moat around them and stave off competition in AI. Thirdly, in a world with a data privacy mandate, AI developers would need to make data choices that deliberately prevent discriminatory outcomes. So we shouldn't be surprised when we see, that women are seeing far less ads for high-paying jobs on Google Ads. That is 100% a feature of data decisions that have already been made upstream. The good news here is that these are avoidable problems, and it's not just in scope for a privacy law. I would say it is integral to protecting people from the most serious abuses of this data. And where specific AI practices have sort of inherent well-established harms, emotion recognition systems that have faulty scientific foundations or pernicious forms of ad targeting, the law would hold them entirely off limits. Finally, and here's the thing about very large-scale AI, it is not only computationally, ecologically, and data intensive, it's also very, very expensive to develop and run. Now, these eye-watering costs will need a path to profit, and by every account, a viable business model still does not exist. Now, it is precisely in this kind of an environment with a few incumbent firms feeling the pressure to turn a profit that predatory business models emerge. Meanwhile, we're hearing new research that LLM systems are capable of hyper-personalized inferences about us, even from the most general prompts. You do not need to be a clairvoyant to see that all roads might well be leading us right back to the surveillance advertising business model that got us here. So to conclude, there is nothing about the current trajectory of AI that is inevitable, and as a democracy, the US has a huge opportunity to take global leadership and shape this next era of tech so that it reflects the public interests and not just the bottom lines of very few companies. This is the moment for action. Thank you.